So, Keith, how did you transition from pastoral ministry to financial planning? What was your journey like?
Yeah, most people think that it's kind of an opposite type of thing. They think that pastoral ministry and financial planning are completely opposites. It's not really the case. I started out in pastoral ministry, getting a bachelor's from Moody Bible Institute and a master's of divinity from
Mm.
a West Coast seminary. And what I found is that a lot of conversations that I was having with people in the churches I was working with dealt with everyday matters that everyone is worried about, kids, marriage, and money. And I had multiple times where I was counseling people from the scriptures about their money struggles. And while I really felt like I was able to counsel them from the scriptures, I didn't know how to fix their money problems.
Mm.
So several years after I left pastoral ministry, that was just the direction I went. Pastoral ministry wasn't my calling. I was working for the state of Pennsylvania in their student loan department. And prior to that, I had been working for a large corporation. So I had both, public and private employment. And I knew that I had some business acumen just listening to my dad, who was a business owner growing up.
Mm.
And I was asking the Lord, what can I do to serve you? I had this growing interest in finance, talking to student loan borrowers. I was talking to them about, budgets and how to pay their student loans. And I realized that the Bible has a lot to say about money, wealth, and generosity. So it was at that point that I kind of a light went off in my head, and I said, I could serve you helping people with their money. And I had found out about the Certified Financial Planner designation and the Certified Kingdom Advisor designation, and I purchased the education requirement, and I worked my way through them. And when my family returned to California, I passed the exams and I started in business.
Oh my gosh, that's fabulous. And it's a huge leap of faith, which obviously you have a lot of, to do that, to go into entrepreneurship. God took you on a journey to find your ultimate
He really
career.
did. He really did. I would have never dreamed that this is where I would end up, but I couldn't be happier.
That's wonderful. Well, this is the Fearless Climbers Business Show, and I'm your business coach and host, Kathleen Reese Jubinville. Today, I'm talking with Keith Conley, independent certified financial planner and certified kingdom advisor. Keith, thank you so much for being here.
Delighted to be here. Thank you so much.
I'd love to hear more about who your ideal client is. Who do you serve with your abilities and your gifts?
My real passion and my real drive in financial planning is to work people who are faith-based, whether that is a successful business owner that wants to steward the wealth that God has entrusted to them to honor the Lord, as it says in Proverbs 3, or a church who needs some money advice, or even ministers. I work a lot with ministers as well as, business owners and churches, helping them navigate their unique financial challenges, but doing so from a biblical perspective.
What are some of the biggest problems that each of those groups have? Just kind of since we've got three different groups we're talking about, kind of a high level, what are a couple of the problems they have?
Well, with a successful business owner, they're really concerned about how to navigate their journey as a successful business owner. How do they manage the wealth that is entrusted to them? How do they steward the business, their employees, the vendors, and their product or service that they're providing to the customers? How do they, relate to their customers in a way that honors the Lord? And then how do they pass that wealth on? How do they pass that business on so that it continues to impact people's lives? Because that's why we go in business, to impact people's lives with a product or service. And it's incumbent upon a business owner to keep that process going even after they leave the business. And what I always tell business owners is, one way or the other, at an unknown point in time, you will leave this business, and how you leave it may not be up to you, but it's up to you to figure out what will happen when you leave the business.
So
and
critical.
If we are faith-based, we need to be able to preparing the next steward of who's going to be running our business, as well as the other wealth that God has entrusted to us as we pass it down to our family And so these people are worried about, how do I build this wealth? How do I honor the Lord with it as I accumulate it? And how do I pass it on? For churches, they're worried about things like how do we pay a minister? How do we manage the wealth from the giving of our people and provide these resources for ministries and other types of events. I'm working with a church right now who received several $millions because their building burned down. And they had never been able to fund a retirement for their pastor who had been there for over 40 years. So I'm helping them with that. And that kind of leads into my third, person that I'm working with, a minister. I'm helping them figure out questions like, do I opt out of Social Security? Should I save for retirement? And how should I save for retirement? And those are unique questions that most people who don't have the proper knowledge don't know how to answer. It's pastors and retirement is a unique animal that's different from everyone else. And so that's really my passion.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I you don't think about that, but nonprofit is, and the ministry in general, but nonprofit is a whole different animal than for-profit companies. So it's really interesting that you have this common thread between them of being faith-based, regardless of where they are in the spectrum of tax category.
Right. And with the ministers, it's great because a lot of times I'm having conversations because they feel guilty building wealth. They're such giving people. They give their whole lives. And my point to these men is that, hey, there's going to come a time when you're going to perhaps be unable to work, or maybe you'll pass away and your wife needs that wealth to survive because maybe she's a homemaker. But also, we need ministers, seasoned ministers who are wise and experienced to have the freedom to minister to younger ministers and to churches in crisis without the obligation of receiving a paycheck. And if I can have that minister prepared to live without a paycheck, they're going to be so much more effective and have so much more use for the kingdom of God. That's
amazing, Keith. And I think you could definitely apply everything you said to faith-based entrepreneurs, for-profit entrepreneurs. I've met a lot of business owners who feel guilt about having a certain amount of wealth. And certainly there's things they can do to enhance their employees' experiences. But it sounds like, that guilt part, and some of it is just an unknowing part of how they feel about their money. Are there other emotions that come up for people when you're working with them and their money?
A lot of fear. We very few people make decisions based upon facts. And when I started out in financial planning, I was very facts-based. This is your projections, this is your likelihood of reaching this type of retirement, and if you do this, this, and this, you'll succeed. And no one would make a decision. And what I realized was that they were afraid to make a decision. They weren't equipped, and they were afraid of making the wrong decision. And so it's about working with people to help them be emotionally ready, not manipulate them, but help them to become emotionally ready to make a decision that will help them, and realizing, what are the consequences for their actions, what could happen, what is kind of a worst case scenario or a best case scenario, and just helping them to work through those emotional fears that they have about making one decision over another.
That's very wise. And it's really a coaching role in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
How is it not really fair that they're not familiar with, their financial situations and their options?
Well, things are always changing. Tax laws are always changing. Environmental conditions, political conditions are always changing. We have things in this world that are just always changing. We know that. And it's just very difficult to keep track of all the different financial decisions. Plus, there are always those people who were saying that this is good, or this is good, or this is bad, and this is bad. And it's really hard to kind of push out that noise and figure out what is really true and what is really the best for that person in that situation.
Personal situations really influence the decisions they're making. And it doesn't matter what anybody else is saying that they're doing. It matters what is appropriate for you. And so how do you specifically work with people to determine what's appropriate for them?
Right. Well, I've developed a process where when I meet with an individual for the first time, we have an exercise that we work through, and I do this for free. It's about a 60 to 90-minute process where we explore what their values are that help them make their financial decisions. So often we're just making a decision here, a decision there, and we don't know why we're making these decisions, but it seems like a good idea. But is it really helping us achieve what we've set out to do? And so we explore together the values that are most important to that individual. And that's how we form our goals. And that's how we form our recommendations to them.
That's fabulous. Well, Keith, I know part of what you're doing is serving others, and part of what you're doing is building your own business. And so I'm curious, what would you say was one of the biggest breakthroughs or challenges you broke through in building your business? And how did you do that?
Well, at first, it was very difficult for me to meet people who were qualified to work with someone like me. And so I got very involved in LinkedIn, and I was meeting a lot of people, but I still wasn't building those close relationships that I wanted to build, to help people and to build business. And so what I realized was that instead of just saying, I want to work with high net worth business owners, I really needed to really make that niche even more focused and be faith-based, because that's what I love, that's what I'm good at, and that's who I connect with the most. And so rather than just working with a business owner, which I could do all day long, I bring the most value to the faith-based business owners and the people who want to make their decisions based upon their faith.
I love
so
that.
When I did that, I became really focused, and it's just been really amazing to see the people that are coming through my door.
Oh, I love it, Keith. People so often resist getting into a niche because they're afraid that they're excluding so many people. But the bottom line is that there's probably millions or possibly a billion people that are in your niche, and so you're excluding, but you're actually attracting then the people that you have a passion for
Right.
serving. And I feel that passion, coming through when you're talking about how you help faith-based entrepreneurs and people in ministry. And so what would be your best piece of advice for someone starting a business from a financial perspective?
Have a process, setting up processes, watching how much money you're spending, because everyone's going to promise you everything in the world. If you pay them that money, they'll get you this amount of leads or whatever. And you really need to know who it is that you're targeting and have a well-defined process to provide that exceptional service or product to them in a way that's most meaningful to them. And just continue to do that process over and over and over. You may revise it, you may amend it, but that's okay. You just stay focused on fulfilling the needs of whoever you want to serve, and don't deviate from that.
Thank you so much, Keith. And what should our audience do if they'd like to connect with you?
Well, as I was telling you before, Kathleen, I'm in the process of rebranding. In the next month or so, I'm hoping to release my website. So I'm not quite ready to announce that yet, but I'm very active on LinkedIn. You can just look me up there. I'm on Facebook and would love to connect with you there. And if anybody would love to do a financial roadmap, which I was discussing earlier, to do the exercise where we discuss your values and your money, it's a free 60 to 90-minute appointment. We can do it virtually. We can do it in person. It's up to you, but be glad to set that up.
And where do they email you, or how do they get a hold of you to do that?
They can email me at Conley, Conley, at onesco, onesco.net, or they can reach out to me over LinkedIn.
Fabulous. And then I understand you have a podcast.
I do. I started a podcast earlier in the fall, kind of getting my feet off the ground, getting getting a little wet behind the ears and figuring out how to do a podcast. But it's called Faith and Money. It's on Substack. I don't charge for it, but it's just intended to talk about the spiritual aspects of money, wealth, and generosity. I host it with a friend of mine, and we're excited to have some guests on to talk about the biblical aspect of money, wealth, and generosity. We're going to have attorneys, tax professionals, business owners, ministers, therapists, and really anybody who could have a really great conversation on some aspect of money, wealth, and generosity. It's not going to talk about the difference between a Roth IRA or a traditional IRA or nothing like that. It's not going to make stock recommendations, but it's just meant to help people think biblically about these topics.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. I'm going to put a link below, so be sure to check out Keith's podcast. Keith, thanks again for being here today. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, it's been great. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. Be sure to follow or subscribe so you don't miss any of our small business success strategies, and click on the links below for more helpful free resources.